he go? Breaks the tackle. He's 10. He's touchdown. Cook's going to throw the deep ball. And Burton past the defense. Touchdown, Luther Burton.
Milrow going to run it again. Got a lane. Kicked in the turbo. Milrow. Goodbye. Touchdown, Bama.
This is Chasing the Natty, a college fantasy football podcast. All right, good evening, everyone. This is Jared Palmgren, host of the Chasing the Natty podcast. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Sunday night. We are back here once again with another one of our college fantasy live streams, drafts, pretty much all those words combined. I always forget how to say it properly in the proper order of words. We're drafting live tonight with the college fantasy draft. We're going to have some fun. And joining us tonight is Mr. Shane P. Hallam from the Draft Sharks Network over there. You can also find him on his work on the countdown.com, where I believe, Shane, you put together a 7-round mock draft for the NFL draft year round. Basically, you do some great work over there. Always an entertaining read whenever you're able to put that kind of stuff together. Lots and lots of fun we're gonna have tonight. Again, we're going full FBS tonight. We're basically sticking with kind of a standard college fantasy draft tonight, nothing too crazy. We're just here to have some fun. Before I forget tonight, I'm making sure I say this early on in the show. Y'all watching, appreciate y'all joining us tonight. If y'all can go ahead and like the video, that helps us out a ton when it comes to getting the algorithm to realize, hey, this is a stream that people are liking. It gets us in front of the eyeballs of people who love college football, love fantasy football, gets us in front of all those eyeballs and really helps us out. So, without further ado, Shane, you're sitting over there nice and handsome. How are you doing tonight, man?
I'm good. Thanks for inviting me in, Jared, man. It's a good time. Yeah, I've put out 7-round mock drafts through 2027. Now, just starting in July, moving over to Draft Sharks full time after 20 years in the industry. So not quite as much NFL draft or college football content. Twitter, I'll be still cutting it up. But I'm excited to dive in with you and really get, show some people how to get your feet wet with college fantasy, as it's growing pretty rapidly here the past couple of weeks.
No joke, dude. It has been a very crazy couple of weeks. Again, obviously the college football game coming out is going to help us out a ton with people getting to know the players better. Underdog surprising everybody with the first ever college fantasy best ball contest that they've hosted. People have been going nuts over that. It is a ton of fun. I've done 2 drafts so far. You guys are going to hear the second one that I did on tomorrow's episode of tomorrow's episode of Chasing the Natty, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. Shane, have you done any of the underdog best ball drafts yet?
Like, don't bring it up. It is not allowed. They're not allowing them in Pennsylvania at this time. Which I've looked at the law. I think it should be legal. So I've yelled at some people. So when we're in Canton for the expo, I may not talk to anyone. I may just draft underdog CFF best ball draft like y'all doing all weekend, so I can get those in while I'm in Ohio.
I think you're going to be out of luck because I think it's not allowed in Ohio either.
Oh my God! So I got to find out what state I need to drive to here.
That's what I was going to say. Are you driving to the expo this year? Or are you
I am. So I'm driving it. It's a nice easy drive for me, 2 hours. So.
Oh, that's not bad at all.
Yeah, so I got to find a state close by that I can just drive to and instead across the border and draft.
Yeah, I mean, and it is crazy, like some of the legality behind it, right? Like Georgia drives me nuts a little bit because, again, you can't do FanDuel, you can't do DraftKings in Georgia for anything DFS or anything like that, but Prize Picks and Underdog are completely okay here, which I'm just like, how does that work? Like, what language is written in the law that allows for parlay only betting, but which is more predatory than just straight up betting? But yeah, just straight line bets are not allowed.
They had no idea how any of this worked, right? And they're just copying laws from other states and pasting them, and you're like, that doesn't make any sense.
But college fantasy is allowed, which is probably the most important part.
Right.
Speaking of which, I'll go ahead and throw us over to the draft page. We got about 5 minutes before our draft starts tonight. Shane, you are drafting out of the 1-7 spot. I have the 1-10 spot. Obviously, I'm not going to ask you who you're going to draft in the first round because I'm looking at this list of people right now. I know for a fact a bunch of these guys are already here in the chat. And so I know that if you mention a single player's name, that they will make sure to take that player for you. But I will ask, like, I haven't done any college fantasy drafts with you. I don't know if you've done any this year. I don't know if this is your first one for the year or anything like that. But I will ask you, what's kind of your general strategy going into college fantasy this year?
I've done a couple. I think it is an interesting landscape this year. It feels very different to me than the last 2 years, where I always felt like, almost any position, I felt like I could grab value, have some confidence in, in these players being big time performers, in the 7th, 8th, 9th round. And, I feel like it's a little shallower this year, just with a lot of the big schools going platoons at running back, or we have some teams where you're seeing multiple wide receivers drafted from that team in the top 10 rounds. And, that doesn't always pay off. So I think it's a little more difficult. So for me, I mean, my strategy is always about value, right? Extracting points where I can and seeing where the value lies. I feel like running back this year is a little bit more hefty. I feel a little more confident in that later. So depending on how the value falls, like I'm happy having the 1-7. I'm not going to consider a running back there unless someone severely falls that shouldn't, which I don't think is going to happen with this group. So, to me, that's great. Like I'd rather pick up some running backs later and focus in on the quarterbacks, which is usually a very deep position. I don't feel as great about it this year. I don't know how you feel, Jared. Wide receiver as well. I don't feel like it's quite as deep, or I'm not as confident as deep as I have been in the past in those two positions.
So thinking about this game 24/7, 365 days a year, I'm confident in pretty much all the positions in terms of like finding value late. But I will say this is the deepest running back class that we've seen probably a while for college fantasy. But I still think it's worth trying to load up on guys because among all the positions, running back is still the one that dries up probably the quickest, even in a deep year like this year. And so I'm perfectly okay with 3 of my first 4 picks just loading up on running backs that, compared to previous years, are just more known quantities, right? You're having to do a lot less projection with running backs this year, and I do think that actually makes them more valuable than trying to grab a next guy up situation. I definitely avoid some of the running backs that almost require a bit of projection that we haven't seen much, because again, there's just so many other guys that we just know they're going to be good. And so with that safety net there, I actually typically do try to hit running back early in these drafts. So we've got a couple of questions here, Shane. We got about 2 minutes before the draft here. We'll try to knock out a few of these here. Mike S. in the chat asks, Darius Taylor or Marion Hampton in a keeper league? Taylor's playoff schedule this year versus Penn State at Wisconsin, next year at Oregon, Ohio State, makes me very, very nervous. Mike, are you sure there's not a way you can keep both? Because like if it's a keeper league where you can only keep one player, that's kind of crazy. But also two, like I'd have to know who else you're considering between like those guys. You must have had a pretty loaded team there. But if you had to ask me which one I'd keep, I would go Hampton. I do think he's probably a little bit safer than Darius Taylor. But Shane, what do you think, man?
No, I'm with you. I mean, Darius Taylor at Minnesota, I think we've seen PJ Fleck run their primary running back down. I think someone even asked a question about it later, right? I mean, we've seen some of those guys emerge. But I think we might see a little more of a platoon this season. Not that Darius Taylor is not going to be an excellent fantasy player, but I don't think Cy Bangura is just going to transfer just to like ride the bench the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
So it wouldn't surprise me if Darius Taylor doesn't end up being this absolute stud. I would go with Amarian Hampton, who from North Carolina, who I think carried that team more than Drake May even last season. Watching him, I think Hampton was the reason why they stayed afloat. To me, it's pretty clear cut. I have Hampton kind of ending a tier and Darius Taylor starting the next tier for me.
I would definitely agree with that. Again, I still expect Darius Taylor to be great this year, and really the big thing kind of holding him back, and Zach hit mentions this in the chat, that really everyone says the issue with Darius Taylor is that he was previously injured, and he did get injured last year. But I forget who I was talking about it with recently, but Taylor's always had a pretty sizable workload, even in high school, and he wasn't getting injured much in high school, which I think helps people with the idea that he won't get re-injured, right? Zach had asked, like, what's the actual rate of re-injury for college players? And the answer to that is the boring one, and that it depends on the player, right? Some people get injured once, that's all that's really going to happen. Some players just have chronic injuries where, man, as much as you want Tyler Shuck to be great for Louisville this year, it's kind of hard to sell me on the idea that a guy injured 3 years in a row is going to not be injured again this year, right? Like, that's just kind of been the unfortunate part of his career. Again, we'll get to some more of these questions here. You guys are loading up on some good questions in the chat. Mitch Hart, I see your question about Stephen McBride. We'll get to that in a second. Trevor Hanna also, I'll answer Trevor's question here as well. Does PJ Flick having a history of running his running backs into the ground affect Darius Taylor's draft value? I would say, yeah, and it already has, right? If we knew, let me ask you, Shane, if we knew Darius Taylor would be healthy the entire season for college fantasy this year, he'd be a top 3 pick, right? Like, he'd be in contention with Ollie Gordon and Ashton Jeanty, right?
Yeah, I think he'd be the third running back off the board for sure. If you could guarantee, full workload and health, yeah, that's the big thing holding you back. Because, if he gets hurt again and then comes back and isn't super effective, it gets a little bit scary. So yeah, I don't think he would fall past 5 in these drafts if we could guarantee that.
All right, I talked about him earlier. I'm going to take my first pick here. I'm taking Amari Hampton. In my opinion, one of the safest running backs you can take in the first round. He got 254 carries last year, and that was with Drake May getting his own great amount of rushing work there last year. The biggest thing probably there, right, is going to be potential less scoring opportunities with a lesser quarterback at the helm. But, give me a guy that's pretty much locked into 275 plus touches. I'll take that in the first round. Shane, you took Kaidon Salter, the first quarterback off the board. Why don't you tell the folks about why you like that pick?
I mean, I love the schedule for Liberty this year. I think Salter, they're going to be one of the best, non-Power 4 teams in the country, and they're the favorite to win that last playoff spot. I think the schedule's really good. When you're taking a quarterback in CFF, obviously a lot of those bigger names, we still see some good matchups. We'll see how a team like Oregon, like Dylan Gabriel, just going at the turn, going to the Big Ten, how that affects them. Salter, we don't have to worry about that. He's going to run, he's going to throw, and I think that's the fun of CFF. Is you get to take some of these smaller players that really, Salter is more talented than that level of competition and shows it week in, week out.
All righty, Clint's already making me mad. He took both of the running backs I was kind of hoping would fall back to me here in the second round. So I'm going to pivot a little bit. I'm going to take a wide receiver here. I'm going to take a guy that some people might question me for taking, considering that his head coach just got fired. But I'm taking Jalen Royals. Big risk here because, again, the portal is still open for him. He could change his mind, but I'm a believer in the idea that he's going to stick around. It's just too close to the season. Trying to transfer to a new school at this point, I think, would be a pretty big mistake for him. I think he's going to ride it out with Utah State, especially with them bringing back or them being able to retain Kyle Cefalo, who was the co-offensive coordinator last year. He's been with Blake Anderson for 7 years. He was the wide receiver and passing game coordinator for 2 years at Utah State. Before he was co-offensive coordinator last year, he was the wide receivers coach during Blake Anderson's time at Arkansas State. He knows this offense pretty much like the back of my hand. If there's a single person on the planet that could keep this offense going in Blake Anderson's absence, it's going to be him. And so I'm going to keep running with Royals here. Shane, you took Pefele Ashlock there. Why don't you tell us about him? And if you got any comments on my Jalen Royals pick, I'd love to hear them.
Yeah, so I was targeting Ashlock from Hawaii here in the second round because of the news today that Stephen McBride was arrested for a felony. He's in prison. The number 2 receiver, who's also a pretty high pick usually from Hawaii. If McBride suspended, can't play, is off the team, I think there's a wide range of possibilities. Someone asked the chat, how far is he going to fall here? We'll see in this draft. Then Ashlock, is in line for a big target share and a ton of targets, especially in the red zone for Hawaii. So I think he could be the best receiver in college fantasy football this year. The Royals pick, I couldn't do it. Like I do think he stays at Utah State. I'm with you, and everything's staying the same. It's supposed to be consistent, but that is a mix up for a team, for a head coach leaving this late in the process. Like I think it's going to be really tough for them to sustain the type of success that they had last season on offense. So I'm fearful for Royals having those type of numbers.
I'm pretty cool with Royals and everything. As long as he stays at Utah State, he's going to be fine. He's worked with Spencer Petras all off season. It's not like he's leaving or anything like that. So to me, I moved him down slightly, and I explained this on tomorrow's CTN episode. I moved him down slightly from wide receiver 4 to 5, and that was really in conjunction with what you were talking about there with Pefele Ashlock, where I moved Pefele Ashlock ahead of him slightly. And the only reason why I took Royals here over Ashlock in my rankings is because I have a lot of Ashlock already, and I wanted to diversify just a little bit there. They're pretty much right in line with each other, in my opinion, but I do agree with you. Ashlock clearly the number one wide receiver at Hawaii now. He should be in for a massive workload once again. I mean, he already had pretty massive workload last year, like 120 plus targets on the year. Like that's elite target share right there. And so I don't know really how much higher he's going to go than that. I really think it benefits
the fact
guys.
that there's a possibility of it going higher is just that intrigues me because if you're missing McBride, some of that has to go to Ashlock still.
I can see it, but again, I'm really keeping an eye on some of the guys behind him, right? Like behind Stephen McBride. I'm personally keeping an eye on Alex Perry. That's kind of my guy that I'm probably going to target in drafts moving forward as the guy that could probably directly benefit from this. He was a guy that was named as a breakout player by the Hawaii beat reporter on the G5 Hive episode. That's going to be where I take my shots from now on. Mitch asked in the chat, as you kind of mentioned, how far does Stephen McBride fall in this draft? And the answer is I don't care. I think he's going to be a bad pick regardless. We're talking about felony assault here, corroborated by multiple witnesses. I do not think there is a good path out of this for Stephen McBride. I really think that he's going to be in for I don't think that there's a scenario where he doesn't miss a large chunk of the season. Now, maybe somebody's going to want to take the shot on there. Maybe charges get dropped. Who knows? But regardless, there'll be some internal team punishments. Come on, Joe. Man, I was waiting. I was waiting for that to come all the way back to me, and now I'm having to pivot. This is disgusting. I don't like this. Every single player that I had on my board was taken from me, and now I don't like any of the options really here. I feel like I'm reaching on pretty much everybody that I'm looking at here. Got about a minute, about 30 seconds for me to make another pick here. Yeah, no, nobody really left on the board that I really love. So yeah, we'll go Alec Ayaminor. I don't love it, but
That's a good pick.
Bobby says Nishigaya will get a lot of targets. I wouldn't be surprised, but if I remember correctly, Nishigaya played in the slot mostly, which is where Ashlock is. And now they run a lot of 4 wide receiver sets, don't get me wrong, but
yeah,
I don't think he'll necessarily be that guy to directly benefit there on the outside. Let me actually look that up. Let me make sure that I'm not talking out of my butt.
Yeah, here. No, you're right. He plays that 4th slot position for them. But I think you wonder if McBride's gone, I think you could see Nishigawa play some of the Z, and maybe they move Perry over to the X. I think there's gonna have to be some shifting going on.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, here it is. Yep, Nishigaya was their 2nd slot receiver last year, and Alex Perry was there on the outside. So I'm still big on Alex Perry being the guy to probably see the most benefit there. Mitchar says McBride is a big fish in a small pond. He thinks the offense gets a little worse. Mitch, that would be absolute worst case scenario for Timmy Chang if that offense in year 2 of the run and shoot actually gets worse. I really think the question of that offense really is going to come down to quarterback more than the receivers. again, McBride was great at times last year, but I don't think, again, McBride and Ashlock were the go-to guys in that offense, but you get all those guys like Alex Perry, another year under their belt, another year within the system. I think we'll see some more guys probably step up a little bit more this year. So, yeah, Bobby's 100% correct. If the offense gets worse, Timmy is out after the season. Like, that's you're pretty much asking for a worst-case scenario there. All right, Tiger Bob taking LeQuint Allen. Don't like that. I'm going to go ahead and take a guy here that I haven't gotten a ton of shares of this year, and I don't usually like taking quarterback this early, but you know what? His upside's incredible. Let's go with Jalen Milroe. Also,
Heisman type upside for sure.
Also, Shane, I completely forgot to allow you to explain your Ishmael Mahdi pick there. Why don't you talk about that, and then by the time you're probably finished, you'll get to your 4-6 pick there.
Yeah, Ishmael Mahdi from Texas State, the running back I took in the third, was good for me in a lot of formats last year. I picked him up. Just a pass-catching running back. I think with Jordan McLeod and that high-flying offense, I think Mahdi's going to have some more scoring opportunities and more opportunities for receptions, despite the great receiving group they have at Texas State. So I think he's a rock-solid, RB1 to get in the third round. I'm pretty happy with that. So yeah, that's kind of my thinking. That's about where I like to take my first running back, because I think it's a deep group. For this fourth round pick is a little more difficult. I think I'm probably going to go. I was kind of hoping for Deion Burks, the receiver from Oklahoma. Tiger Bob took the beginning of the fourth to fall. That didn't happen. So I'm going to go back to the Oklahoma well. I think Oklahoma is going to be a really great offense in the SEC this year. So I'm going to take Gavin Sawchuk, the running back for Oklahoma, 4.3 speed. He's someone who established himself that he could carry the load a bit last year for Oklahoma. Despite the size, I think he's due for a breakout season. And I think I'd have more interest in him than some of the other running backs on the board that are going to share carries.
Well, that's what I was actually about to ask you. Mahdi and Sawchuk, I think, is an interesting duo of running backs there, because they're guys that are going pretty high, but I think there's a non-zero chance that both of them end up in more committee situations than we kind of want to admit. Like, Mahdi was obviously a beast for Texas State last year, but they went out and grabbed a ton of guys out of the transfer portal, out of the running back position. No, they're not. We're not talking like superstars or anything like that, right? But they clearly wanted to add more bodies there so that they didn't have to rely on Mahdi as much. I mean, Mahdi did get hurt last year. They probably want to avoid that here again this year. Probably not looking at the solid 20, 25 touches every single week again. And then Sawchuk, right? Yes, there's obviously a path for him to have a great RB1 season there, but they do have plenty of other backs in that backfield, right? Barnes is still there. Khalif Hicks is still doing well back there. I think that there's a lot of risk in both those guys kind of being taken here in the third, fourth round. Don't mean like to crap on your picks per se, but I'm just saying.
No, look, it's fine, Jared. No, I mean, look, I think at this point in the draft in general, I think it's a fear. I think Mahdi produced with even some of the games where he had more limited touches. None of the transfers strike too much fear to me there. Like, I don't think any of them are very good. I guess Deion Hankins probably is the best one. I'm not, and I'm not a big Javonte Barnes fan. I don't think we see Taylor Tatum get on the field for Oklahoma. Like I said, I think Sawchuk was clearly the best back. So it's a little bit of projection, but I think it's two potential values if both Mahdi and Sawchuk do end up leading those backfields as the guy, as more of a workhorse, then they're both going to end up as steals.
Boy, oh boy, look at this quarterback run that's come off after your pick here. Nico Imalieva, Garrett Green, Avery Johnson, Seth Hennigan, KJ Jefferson, Kyron Drones. I don't know if this is the impact of underdog fantasy and everything, because quarterbacks go off real early in those drafts, but even still, quite a lot of people going with two quarterbacks here in the fourth, fifth round.
It's still going.
It just keeps going, man. Again, you got three teams taking the double quarterback strategy there. Now I'm really glad that I took Jalen Milroe, but man, it made quarterback dry up pretty dang quickly here. There's still plenty of guys I like on the board, don't get me wrong, but like
That was a run.
it was quite a run. So Shane, you're back on the clock here, man. What are you thinking?
I think I definitely want to pivot back to receiver, and I'm looking at a couple big school receivers here. So I think, I think I'm going to play the homer card a little bit. I'm going to take Emeka Egbuka for Ohio State here in the fifth. I have some trust in Will Howard to be a slight upgrade at quarterback, and if Egbuka can stay healthy this season, Jeremiah Smith looks great as a freshman, and Carnell Tate had his moments, but I think Egbuka is by far the most talented receiver in that group, and is going to get a ton of targets, even if they're a little more run heavy. It's Chip Kelly; they're still going to throw the football, so a little bit. I think Egbuka is going to get most of that work.
Yeah, the problem is we haven't really seen a Chip Kelly wide receiver really produce at that level since his days at Oregon. Now, again, that's clearly not to say that isn't possible, and Ryan Day is still going to have his finger on that offense, at least somewhat.
Yeah.
But
yeah, they're still going to want to throw a little bit more. I mean, I think the Ohio State offense equates a lot more to Oregon than it does UCLA, so we'll see what happens.
All right, I went ahead and took Jalen White here. I'm happy to take a guy that's pretty much locked into 20, 25 touches per game, so long as he's healthy. That's kind of the main question with Jalen White, is that he hasn't really had a fully healthy season in the last 2 years, but fingers crossed he'll be a big part of that offense again this year, especially if none of the quarterbacks really step up. He'll be somebody that they're going to have to rely on, and he's a boring but very safe pick in this range, in my opinion. Trevor Hanna says, thoughts on the quarterback position this year? Does the position feel thinner from a fantasy perspective this year? I don't necessarily think it feels thinner. I think top to bottom, you're looking at a pretty standard, if not slightly better than average quarterback class, in my opinion, this year. We got a lot of people coming back, a lot of quarterbacks that transferred to really, really good position, or really good situations, in my opinion. And I'm back on the clock. I'm going to go ahead and take Jeremy Bernard here. A lot of quarterbacks transferring to really good spots. I'd say probably the thing that makes it feel thinner is that last year we were absolutely spoiled with some of the elite quarterbacks returning. Thinking about Austin Reed. You had Jaden Daniels, who obviously wasn't a first round pick last year, but he's a 4th, 5th round pick. People knew there was incredible upside there. You're thinking of your Bo Nixes, guys like that. A bunch of guys going off in the first round of college fantasy drafts last year that were elite options from the year before. We don't have that nearly as much this year. We got Keaton Salter, Byron Brown. They come back. Dylan Gabriel was an elite CFF quarterback going to an elite, transferring to another elite CFF system there. I think that's why he's getting taken early. But overall, I think top to bottom is about the same. Shane, you're on the clock here, but also, what do you think of the quarterback position this year?
I guess I'm a little less bullish than you are. I do think it kind of dries up. You did mention we had a lot of good transfer spots. There's a lot of potential. I think at the end of the year it's going to be fine, but I think it's a little bit harder to me to predict. To predict how well some of these quarterbacks are going to do. I think almost from here on out in the draft, there's a lot of upside, but there's a lot of downside with almost all these players. Whereas I felt like the past 2 years, through the 8th or 9th, you could feel pretty confident in the quarterback you're going to draft. So I think you should have to load up. I've been taking kind of an extra one than I usually would in past years, just to feel a little bit safer if I have a bust in there.
No, totally fair. I guess that kind of begs the question, Shane. When you go into these 30-round CFF drafts here, right? What's your kind of roster makeup typically? I typically go with 6 quarterbacks, 4 tight ends, 10 wide receivers, 10 running backs. That's kind of where I, on average, kind of fall. I'll kind of shift depending on how confident I feel in certain groups. Where do you kind of fall?
Yeah, I'm not too far off. I think I've gone 7 quarterbacks pretty consistently. I usually don't drop below that, mostly because I'm not going to take 2 before the fifth round. It's not going to happen. So I'll usually go 7, and then 3 to 4 tight ends, depending how early I go there, and then 10 and 10, whichever position I feel stronger for me, running back or receiver, I'll take 1 less. So I'm not too far off from you, but I'll almost certainly go that extra quarterback.
Gotcha. And do you kind of, obviously Salter kind of fell to you here, but are you one to typically go after those elite quarterbacks in the first round in order to kind of anchor yourself, and then you kind of wait a bit till later to draft the rest of your quarterback room? Is that kind of your strategy?
I like that the best this year. That's where I've felt like I've drafted the best teams, when I've gotten a good anchor quarterback in the first or second, depending on how they fell and where I sat. One of those top three, especially, and sometimes Jordan McLeod. I'm pretty confident and comfortable with. So yeah, I'll wait. I'll probably, with the way quarterbacks go off the board, I'm probably going to wait maybe too long in this draft, but I'm definitely going to wait longer.
Yeah, potentially. What do you look for in those later round quarterbacks, if that's the strategy that somebody might want to emulate?
Look, I think if you're looking at the late round guys, for me, a lot of it is I'm drafting for upside at that point. If I have a rock solid quarterback, one like Salter, where I feel confident he's going to be in the spot, every week, I need to fill the other spot, then I really only need one more quarterback to fill that spot. So I'm really swinging for upside, getting running quarterbacks on, really good teams that I think could just explode offensively, getting quarterbacks that I think are very talented at lower levels of competition that I think can just absolutely dominate their schedule. Toward the end of the draft, maybe I'll do it here. We'll see. I've taken quarterbacks that maybe haven't won the job, might not win the job. I'll take a shot on one as that seventh guy. And if they do, it's wheels up in a good situation. So I've definitely certainly done that as well. Because I think if you lose a quarterback, you lose a quarterback's numbers, and I'm drafting 7. It's not a big deal to me. So I'd rather just take the upside.
Are you somebody, when it comes to situations like that, right, where a quarterback may not win the job, do you try to grab both of those guys, or do you pick the guy that you believe in, you kind of move on?
I generally would pick the guy I believe in, move on, unless I'm going to take like multiple shots, essentially, if that makes sense. Like, I usually won't do that more than one spot. So I'm taking the guy that I believe will win it. I feel like I've generally done well at predicting that. And I don't have my misses, but that's certainly, to me, I don't want to waste an extra roster spot. And then potentially, hey, someone gets hurt. Yeah, sometimes I've done that, drafted 2, and then the second guy isn't even the backup, and you start just like, it's just too much for me. So, all
right, Shane, you're on the clock here, man. What are you looking at?
Yeah, I'm gonna pop the tight end cherry here. I'm gonna take Harold Fannin in the 7th.
Right.
Once again, lock up the spot. I don't have to worry about tight end for a while. It's gonna be running back and receiver for me for a bit going forward.
All right, I got a guy that I have my eye on greatly here that I'm really hoping Joe does not take from me here. I will ask you, Shane, again, not to spoil anything you might be targeting later, but I'm on the clock here. I'll go ahead and take my guy, Brady Cook. I'm really glad he fell to me here. Solid 25 point per week guy. Upside's not, there like it is with Milroe and some of the other guys taken recently, but I feel very safe taking him here. But what quarterback competitions are you kind of trying to target later in drafts that you feel like you could take advantage of?
So probably the biggest one that's like up in the air is Western Kentucky. I think Western Kentucky is going to be a place where the quarterback's going to perform. I'm definitely I'm in the anti-TJ Finley camp. So I think Caden Velkamp will win that job. So I've been drafting him a bit in the very, very late rounds when, he's there. I think people are avoiding that situation. So that's been a big one. An earlier one, and obviously he's going earlier because I think everyone's fairly confident. But, I drafted Jamal Pritchett, the receiver out of South Alabama. I really like that South Alabama offense. I think Giovanni Lopez clearly showed that he's the guy there. That's all the reports kind of coming out. I don't think it's 100% yet. You can correct me if I'm wrong. But with the rushing ability and rushing upside he has, that I'm pretty happy and confident with him too.
All right, you're back on the clock here, man. What are you going with?
All right. So I'm going to swing for the upside fences on quarterback. I think for my QB2 here, there's 2 that I like.
Don't take the guy that
I'll play. Oh no, that's fine. I'll play a little safe. I'm going to take Cam Ward from Miami. There's a chance I think that Miami offense could be one of the best in the country if Cam Ward lives up to expectations. he could have. No one's going to have a Jaden Daniels type here, but that type of impact with his rushing and passing and the receiving group that's out there for Miami. So I like the upside there.
I'm not sure Ward's really like a true rushing guy. I mean, obviously he had 8 touchdowns last year, but I think that might have been more the system than like him as an actual player. We'll see what Shannon Dawson does, but
yeah.
I don't think we can really expect him to get like, 300, 400, 500 yards on the ground. Now, hopefully Shannon Dawson still gets him those 6 to 8 touchdowns on the ground just around the goal line, because he clearly proved he could do it last year, and Ward's a big dude, so he can take those hits right around that goal line. So I think I honestly think that's a great pick, great pairing there with Kaidon Salter. Mike Esk asked in the chat, and Shane, you can definitely tell me if I'm wrong on this one, but he says, do you think we'll all be kicking ourselves for not drafting Quinshon Judkins a round or 2 sooner, or will Henderson really stick in that platoon? Mike, my hot take is that I think we're drafting the wrong running back by having Quinshon Judkins go a couple rounds earlier than Henderson in most drafts. I cannot fathom the idea that they bring Henderson back, pay him rumored at least $1 million in NIL money to come back for another season when he could have been the first running back off the board in the NFL draft this year, and then only for him to be playing second fiddle to Quinshon Judkins. I just don't see that reality happening there. At worst, I think it's a 50-50 split between the two of them. We've seen Chip Kelly have 2,000-yard running backs in the past, so I think there's a world where both Judkins and Henderson are the guys there. But again, Henderson was a guy that people were talking about as the clear RB1 in his draft class, and as much as we like Judkins, he clearly was staying healthier at Ole Miss back there. But if Henderson's healthy and he plays like he did in his freshman year at any point, like, I don't think you can justify the idea that Judkins is just going to overtake and become the workhorse back over Henderson. I think anybody who drafts Henderson, especially if you can get him a couple of rounds after Judkins, is getting the better value out of the two. Shane, you're the Ohio State fan, man. Am I off base here, or what do you think?
I'm with you, Jared. I'm 100% in agreement with you. I think Henderson is the better and more dynamic back. I think Judkins might get a little more of that touchdown work, and maybe that pushes him above Henderson in the fantasy realm. But ultimately, I think Henderson, a healthy Henderson, game to game, is going to score more fantasy points to me. So I'm right with you. I think he's going to be wheels up. I wouldn't touch Judkins at his ADP at this point.
All right, I'm loading up on some guys here. Shane, you are on the clock. What are you thinking, man?
I think I'm going to keep hitting receiver just to get a pretty good group here. I'm going to go with Jordan Moore, the receiver out of Duke. I think he's the one weapon that the Blue Devils have. I think he's going to be a consistent pass catcher, and man, he's fun to watch. He's a fun player to watch too. So I think Moore's going to have some big spike weeks.
I need Mitch to come up with a fun nickname for these type of players, but there are certain players in college football, right, where their teams need to have a big season out of them in order for, if they're going to accomplish anything, right? And Jordan Moore for Duke is absolutely one of those players, right, where they basically are. He has to have 1,000-yard wide receiver if Duke's going to reach a bowl game. If anything else, like they have to rely on him. He's clearly the best player on that offense right now. I do actually kind of like Jacquez Moore as like a late round running back option, but even so, like Jordan Moore, I think like you have to have a big season out of him if Duke's going to be doing what they want to do this year, and they're going to feed him a crap load of targets. That let me see if I can look it up real quick. He was on a pretty big volume run to end the season. I'll have to look it up here in a second. I just went ahead and took I didn't actually take Stone Earl there. I'm taking him as a placeholder for Chandler Morris there at North Texas. Stone Earl retired this year, so he makes a good placeholder there. Again, I'm kind of loading up on some high upside quarterbacks in this range, dual threat guys and systems that I like. Took a safer guy there with Brady Cook. I'm taking a high upside guy with Chandler Morris at North Texas, which just made Chandler Rogers the QB, I think 19 last year, and that was with him missing a couple of games. So I'm liking it. I'm liking it quite a bit. All right.
I like that pick. I like Chandler Morris this year, for sure. And I always feel like the guys that need placeholders, let's go a little bit later than they should, right? Even for experienced CFF players, like a lot of the people in here.
I will not lie. When I saw him on my rankings here, I immediately put him in my queue, being like, "Yep, this is probably a guy because he needs a placeholder that I can rely on getting him next round." And bada bing, yes sir,
Okay.
I was
Boom,
correct.
Done.
Ooh, great pick by Clint there with Grayson McCall, and not a bad first quarterback pick there from Clint. Let's see. I got 3 wide receivers so far. I think I'm gonna go ahead and take. My first guy here. Yeah, I haven't gotten a ton of this guy recently. He's been going earlier than the 10th round in recent drafts. His ADP has just shot up since the spring, and honestly, I think he's going a little bit too high in some drafts now. But 10th round, I'll take the shot here. Give me some Denzel Boston, high upside guy here in the 10th round.
Yeah.
In Washington. Again, scoring opportunities might be limited because I do think Washington's going to be in rough shape this year, but he's clearly the number 1 guy there, at least based on reports right now out of Washington. So I'm feeling pretty good about that. All right, Shane.
Yeah, do you feel confident of him being the number 1 guy there? I think that's my only.
I feel confident in that.
Like Jeremiah Hunter.
No, I'm not buying Hunter. I
Cool.
think I think that's something that we all kind of assumed going into the year because him and Giles Jackson going into the spring were really the only guys that had any like true experience compared to the rest of the wide receiver room. Boston is a guy that showed some flashes last year, but the coaching staff has been very, very clear about the fact that he is made a huge jump this spring. There's a steady drumbeat all spring that, hey, this is going to be our number 1 guy. It's probably going to be our number 1 guy. Guess what? In the spring game, 7 catches, 129 yards, and a touchdown.
Yeah, beasted.
Guess what? It looks like he's the number 1 guy moving forward. And he's young. I don't think we've seen the full upside of him yet. As my 4th wide receiver option, I'll take it. Dylan Knob asked in the... Oh, wait, Shane, you made a pick there with Thomas Castellanos. Why don't you tell everybody about that real quick? Dylan, we'll get to your question in just a second.
Once again, swinging for that upside. This is definitely the rushing upside with Castellanos. I was considering him in the 9th, so to get him in the 10th, I was pretty happy with that. I don't think Boston College is going to be super dynamic, but I think we could see him flirt with double-digit rushing touchdowns this year.
I can definitely see it. All right, Dylan Knob in the chat says, I'm looking for my 4th league title this year. Ollie's my keeper, and I have the 3rd overall pick in the draft, which, first of all, how do you have the 3rd overall pick if you won the league? That's my question.
I like that. Man.
But secondly, Dylan, he asked, should I go wide receiver or quarterback? Dylan, I'd have to know. I don't know if you know in your league who all the keepers are going to be, but I would have to know who's off the board, right? Because like if Kaidon Salter and Dylan Gabriel and Byron Brown are all off the board, there's somebody else's keeper, then I think the answer is clearly wide receiver, right? There's just more guys that will kind of go in that range, but I just have to know more about what the actual player pool looks like. Shane, are you kind of on the same page?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends who's being kept, but yeah, I mean, it feels like it would depend. I guess receivers probably more likely if those top quarterbacks are being kept. Like I would assume so.
All righty. And Connor Bull, I forgot to answer your question earlier in the chat. He said, can Jordan James get 80% of Buckeyes' production in the Oregon offense this year? I like Jordan James. We've seen them already employ a committee approach, and part of the only reason why Bucky Irving was as great as he was because he's just so dang efficient. Like, and the efficiency for Bucky Irving the last couple of years has just been absolutely monstrous. And Jordan James was very efficient as well, no doubt about it. And so I do think he doesn't really need the volume like you would expect. But I still expect Oregon to mostly split the balls. Again, they get Noah Whittington back this year. They have a couple of younger guys that they're trying to train up over there. They bring in Jay Harris from the FCS. I think he'll kind of rotate in a little bit. So do I think he can get 80% of Buckeyes' production in the Oregon offense? Probably not that high, but he's still a good pick overall, and I'd say probably the third, even better in the fourth round for college fantasy. Shane, do you agree with my assessment there?
I think it's fair. I'm comfortable with him in the fourth. I do think Noah Whittington is going to get some work. I think we'll cut into Jordan James a little more than we want to. But 80% of what Bucky did, I think is going to be tough to come by, to be honest.
So Zach hit asking a question in the chat here about the Wazoo offense. You guys know me. I love to talk the Wazoo offense. I'll make a pick here real quick. I think a wide receiver here. I'll go Kobe Hudson out of UCF. He asked, would you pick Kyle Williams before Meredith? In my rankings, I have them right next to each other. And it really, this is going to be a cop-out answer, but it really depends on what I already have on my team. If I need a safer pick, like higher floor guy, I'm going Kyle Williams. We've seen him do it already, right? Last year, he was a top 36 wide receiver in college fantasy as that outside position. We know for a fact the position with the high upside in that offense is the slot, which is why I'm willing to rank Josh Meredith, who I expect to start in the slot, pretty high. Same with Chris Hudson. If I'm looking for upside, I go with one of those guys. But in terms of just which one I feel like is safer overall, it's got to be Kyle Williams. So, Shane, what do you think?
I think I'm taking Kyle Williams. I feel like if there's one offense that, if you let me see in the future and see what the offense was going to be, I think it would be Washington State. Like, just to get cemented, how good are they going to be? How these wide receivers going to be fed? I think it would answer a lot of questions. But I'm for playing it safe with Kyle Williams is definitely my pick for that receiver group.
So let's see. By the way, Shane, you picked Ches Malusi there. I thought it was a great pick at running back. Why don't you talk about him real quick?
I really like his kind of multifaceted upside. I mean, he was a player last year, but when Malusi got into the game, I thought he showed, he was even better than Braylon Allen in some spots. So I think they really unleash Malusi's ability, catching some passes, in that pass-first offense. And I think it's going to be a lot more scoring opportunities. I think Wisconsin's going to be a lot better with him, with Pauling. I think the offense is going to take off with them Van Dyke. I think it's going to be pretty good. So I'm excited about that pick in the 11th. I was hoping he'd fall.
All right, real quick, where is it? Rebs, I don't know if you're in the chat. I am going to switch out your Keenan Kristen pick here with Leo Kemp because I do think that there's a possibility that somebody might want to draft Kristen towards the end of the draft. So I'm going to switch him out with somebody that I know for a fact nobody's going to draft. So just in case. Because again, Shane, I don't know if you saw this recently. We talked about it a bit on Chasing the Natty last week, but there was a depth chart put out by San Diego State during their media days. Now, how much do you want to bank on a depth chart being put out before fall camp even begins? Who knows? But it was put out there, and it did have Keenan Kristen listed as the number one running back along with Marquez Cooper. Does that kind of impact where you would potentially draft Marquez Cooper in these drafts?
No, I think Marquez Cooper still is a decent value, where he's going with, we know the talent and we know what that situation can bring. I do think Kristen gets some work. I mean, he's an athletic freak. So I think it's still worthwhile to, I don't think I've drafted him yet, but I've considered him late in drafts after it came out. Like, it wouldn't surprise me if he gets a little bit of work. But I don't know. I don't know if anyone expected Cooper to be a workhorse running back there. I'm comfortable with this range for Cooper.
Yeah, here in the 10th round, I think is fine. I've seen him go as high as like the 5th, 6th round. I think that's just a little bit too much.
That's a little bit nuts.
But let's see. First of all, appreciate all of you guys in the chat. You guys have been asking great questions tonight. I appreciate the variety and topics that we've been able to get from you guys here tonight. Just a quick reminder to all of you guys, if you have not liked the video already and shared with your college football buddies, again, we talk pretty much just college fantasy here, but we talk college football just in general as well. And so they want to come here, ask our opinion, who's going to win the Natty this year, who's going to win the Big Ten, which team's the one to watch out for in the Mountain West? Like, we'll answer those questions too. We're here to just really have a great time and help you guys out with your fantasy leagues, but also here with just a chat. Like, this is the place to go to, in my opinion, for Sunday night chats about college football, where you can actually hear back from the hosts. And so, again, we got a couple more questions here. We'll talk about our picks here after we answer a couple of questions here. Shane, Reed, Saboda asked in the chat, Breed, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name there. He said, T-Mac or Luther? I've had T-Mac as my number one wide receiver all offseason, but man, like, I really don't like the language that's coming out of the coaching staff right now, talking about that foot injury. It's making me just a little bit queasy. I still think T-Mac's probably worth a first-round pick right now, but I gotta say, at this point, I'm probably drafting both Luther Burden and Torrey Horton ahead of him, just because I feel a little bit safer. What about you, Shane? How do you feel about T-Mac?
I don't think I'd take Ted McMillan in the first round. To me, well, like, that foot injury, I think, is scary. I think even keeping a lot of the same players and system, I think there's a lot still changing there for Arizona. I think there's just so much risk in taking Ted McMillan. Like, I wouldn't do it. I'd definitely take Burden. I'd definitely take Horton. I'd probably still take him over the next group of receivers, but it's scary. I don't want to waste the 103 or 104 and have a guy that's not going to be healthy and, sit out or sees the NFL on the wall. And I don't think that's his personality, but I don't want to try there.
Mitch says, don't overthink McMillan. He will be fine. He will be, like, as the season goes on. It's just a matter of, does he miss the first couple of games, or is he heavily limited the first couple of games? Which, again, like, that's not something I really want in the first round, right? And
it's not like we're saying, like, don't draft him, right? It's why take on the risk when you have Torrey Horton and Luther Burden, who both can put up similar, if not better, numbers anyway. Why make that risk?
Exactly. It's really just a matter. Like I said, I still think he's a first-round pick for the most part, but there's just enough there to kind of have him move down my wide receiver rankings. I'm not moving him down a full tier or anything like that, like Shane said. Let's see. Ryan Karp says, explain, if possible, the divide. Top 3 to 4 teams expected to win the national championship don't have all their fantasy players picked at all the time. So, yeah. Looks like Ryan. I think what Ryan's trying to ask here is why aren't national championship contending teams why are their players not being taken higher in drafts? And I really think it has to do with a lot of those national championship teams not relying on one guy. If you're built to win a national championship, you're not doing it off the back, typically, of one player making a grand performances. These are usually teams with big depth. They rotate their guys a lot, making sure they're always healthy, always not gassed in those situations. And because of that rotation, it makes their guys just a little bit less valuable, even though they, as Karp would probably point out, these are all teams that probably score, 35, 40, 45 points a game, which makes a lot of scoring opportunities, but also they're teams that'll end up blowing out a lot of teams during the regular season, and therefore you have some guys sitting out. So Shane, how do you kind of view that conundrum of national championship contending teams not having their players drafted as early in these drafts?
No, I think what you said is great, and I think it is one of the pieces that makes it sometimes hard to sell college fantasy football, and I think it's why Underdog's doing Power 4 and that kind of thing, so you get some of those better teams players pushed up. But we were just talking about Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson. Like, Ohio State's got 2 really good running backs, so it's just like in your NFL fantasy leagues, when you have a team with 2 really good fantasy running backs, like they generally both fall in drafts because they're going to split the carries. If a team has a lot of wide receiver options, then it's harder to take them. And sometimes in CFF it gets easier because you have a team like Oregon that can, teams can support 2, sometimes 3 fantasy receivers in college versus the NFL. But that's why when you are opening the pool to so many, players and to, all the G4, G5 schools, then you have a Duke in the ACC that has to rely on Jordan Moore. I just took Christian McCray from Kent State. I mean, he's their offense, like that's going to be their offense. So that you feel more confident in those players than, taking Georgia wide receivers, right, Jared?
Yeah, no, for sure. I had to throw the little dig there. I understand. Let's see. Connor Bull asks if he had to pick one guy to keep, Jordan James or LaQuint Allen. I actually would go LaQuint Allen. I as much as there's a bunch of change in the quarterback or in the head coaching and offensive coordinator change, they've been very clear all offseason that LaQuint Allen's going to be a huge part of that offense. Once again, he's clearly the most valuable running back that they have there. If it gives you any idea, their backup running back will be a true freshman this year in Yasim Willis, who I do like quite a bit. But the fact that they have nobody else that they can really rely on there kind of tells you that Allen's probably going to get his. And I think he's actually probably a little bit safer, and I think he'll split the carries less than Jordan James will. Shane, how do you view Jordan James versus LaQuint Allen?
I'm with you on LaQuint Allen. I mean, I really like the new Syracuse coaching staff, and they were not afraid to shake things up and bring in transfers and, pull scholarships from incoming freshmen. Like they were shaking it up. And so the fact that LaQuint Allen is still the guy, and as you said on the depth chart, seems like a chasm between him and the next player. To me, it just means he's going to be the workhorse. And I think, they brought in Kyle McCord, but I do think Syracuse, even with Rhonda Gadsden still, is going to have to run the football to win games. And I think you're going to see that.
All righty. Been a bit since we talked some of our picks. Again, you already kind of mentioned your Christian McCray pick about why you're grabbing him. Again, he's going to be their whole offense. I went ahead and took Xavier Henderson here in the 13th round. That just feels so crazy to me. This guy almost got 100 targets last year, and he's going in the 13th round. He's going to get an upgrade at the quarterback position because Emory Jones was hot doo-doo last year. And Brendan Sorsby, in my opinion, showed more talent last year as a redshirt freshman than we ever really saw out of Emory Jones, at least in the passing game. So I think he'll get an upgrade there, right? If he got 100 targets last year, I fully believe he'll get it again this year. And yeah, again, just a very safe pick for the most part. I think that offense is going to get some more scoring opportunities than in the past. It's what I'm liking there. And then I also took Jaquavius Marks. I haven't taken a ton of Jaquavius Marks this year, but here in the 14th round, it's hard for me to pass up on what looks to be the top running back in Lincoln Riley's offense. He does typically go committee quite a bit, but with Miller Moss not quite being the rushing quarterback that we've seen in the last couple of years, I do think the running backs at USC are going to get a bit more carries. And for the most part, we're not talking about guys that'll win you leagues, but Lincoln Riley running backs for the most part still are pretty solid. Like they'll end up in the RB 30-40 range so long as they're healthy the full 12 games, which has kind of been the main problem for them the last couple of years. So I'll happily take them here in the 14th round. Shane, you took Caleb Jackson in the 14th round. What do you think?
Well, I got to swing for the fences maybe a little bit early, but I really have faith in the talent. And obviously, I like LSU as an offense. I mean, I think they're going to not quite be what they were last year, but still be a really good offense in the SEC. I think Caleb Jackson is going to be relied on heavily for them. So that's kind of my upside, big school pick here at running back, as I took a couple of, took Ricky Hunt and took Monty earlier, who I think, they'll be able to lock it down for me.
All right, let's see what I can get here. I do notice that Carp there took Jeremiah Smith. Shane, again, you being the Ohio State guy, what do you think of that pick? Again, not typical that true freshmen go that high in college fantasy redraft leagues, but obviously there's a ton of hype around Jeremiah Smith. Multiple people saying that he basically looks like an NFL wide receiver right now as a freshman. And so are you willing to take the shot on him as an Ohio State fan this high in drafts, or how do you feel about that?
Nah, more power to Carp to take him in the 15th. I mean, I think Jeremiah Smith's worth the pick, but the fact that, Marvin Harrison is who he was and didn't get on the field until the bowl game as a freshman. I think Jeremiah Smith is going to play, but I think you're going to be hard pressed to get the numbers that you want consistently out of him. Maybe you get a spike week or two, but I think teams are still going to key in pretty well. I still lean. It depends on the draft and how my team is. I might take Smith for the upside, but I still lean that Carnell Tate will probably have a better season than Jeremiah Smith will.
All right, you heard it here first from Shane. Carnell Tate over Jeremiah Smith, and I do believe, if I remember correctly, that Tate is still on the board here, so might be getting a good value to anybody there who wants to draft. Yep, there he is. He's actually pretty high in my queue. Maybe I grab him here over the next.
Yeah, look, you can take some of those Buckeyes. That'd be good, Jared.
No. I'll keep it going here. I'm gonna take back-to-back running backs that have really kind of again. Maybe I'm getting overzealous here, but okay. Thought I lost.
I like
there
it.
For a
yes,
second.
I love Carson.
I'm two guys that have been jumping up my rankings here recently. Two guys I'm getting more and more confident in as the season gets closer and closer here. Javon Jackson, he was quite the monster at Austin Peay last year. He follows his head coach from Austin Peay to UTEP. I don't know how good this offense is going to be in year one. That's kind of the risk I'm rolling the dice on here, but they play in the CUSA. It's kind of similar to the Western Kentucky situation from a couple years ago, right? Like if there's a conference where you can feel pretty good about an offense translating into year one, just because the talent level on defense that they're facing on a week-by-week basis just isn't there, I think you can bet on that in the CUSA. So do I expect Javon Jackson to be as efficient as he was? Probably not. But even still, lock in a guy that's probably looking at least 200 to 250 touches here in the 15th round. I'm feeling good about it. And then Dylan Carson, you're talking about my, sixth running back off the board for me. I'm just taking an upside shot here. It sounds like he'll be in that super back position for Air Force this year. For those of you who remember, obviously, Emmanuel Michel last year was pretty dominant. Brad Roberts a couple years ago, it was a monster with 1,700 yards. Again, I don't know if they're going to be able to get a Brad Roberts type of season here, but as my sixth running back, I'm taking the shot here. So, Shane, your last two picks were Lenora Sellers and Elijah Metcalf there. What do you like about those two picks?
Now, once again, Sellers, the quarterback, South Carolina, I'm taking the shot on the rushing upside. In the SEC with South Carolina's offensive line, it's like, what really is that upside? But I think Sellers is a special talent, especially with his legs. If we see that come to fruition, I think you're going to see some spike weeks where, once again, I'm just figuring that Caden Salter's getting that QB1 spot. I just need a QB2 every week, and if I can have some different spike weeks from these quarterbacks, I'm happy with it. And I really like Elijah Metcalf. Similar to Jordan Moore pick and the McCray pick, like I think Marshall's offense is going to run through Metcalf. He's supremely talented. I think he's one of the best route runners, even in the non-power four out there. I think he's going to have a really good year.
All right, Shane, you're back on the clock here. While you're thinking about that pick, I'm going to give the audience a challenge real quick. Not a challenge per se, but I want to hear from you guys. Bobby just mentioned that Braden Shaker kind of went high in the draft here. Why don't you guys go ahead and each of you who are listening, look at the draft board as best you can. Obviously, I know we can't have all 12 teams up on the board here at once, but y'all go ahead and give me one player name that you would like us to discuss that you find interesting being drafted right in this range. That way we can kind of go real quickly through a bunch of guys here that you guys want to hear about. Shane, you got 20 seconds left, man. Who you thinking about?
My computer. I'm taking Matthew Sluka here.
He is already off the board.
Oh, okay. Well, never mind.
Let me know who you want. I can switch him out.
Then I'll take your quarterback. I'll take Brendan Sorsby instead for Cincinnati.
Okay.
Who you talked about before. So my apologies.
All good. Again,
Lenoff. I see it.
Yep. Yeah, Lenoff came off there at 12-2. Honestly, good on Clint here. This is a pretty solid group of high upside quarterbacks. Again, I think Shager might be a little bit early. I feel like he could have gotten him later, but McCall, Sluka, Raynor, if two of those three guys really pay off, that's an excellent quarterback room to grab past round 10 there.
Yeah, 10 to start around 10 with your quarterbacks. That's a pretty good group to swing for some upside.
Joe, good pick there with Chris Bell. That was definitely one of the guys that I was looking at here. I think I'm going to continue loading up on running back here. There's a lot of running backs actually in this range that I like for the most part. I think I'm going to continue it here with another Big Ten running back here. Give me Nathan Carter out of Michigan State. We've seen Jonathan Smith over the years have great top-end running backs for college fantasy. Damon Martinez was the latest in that line right there. There's really nobody else at Michigan State that I can really expect to kind of make that step up. They did bring in Kyron Adams from UMass, but again, Kyron Adams, I don't really expect to translate very well from UMass's schedule to the Big Ten. I still think Nathan Carter is going to be the main guy there pretty easily. And so I think that I'm pretty happy grabbing him here as my 7th running back.
No, I like that. I like that upside. That offense could be like really good for Michigan State, surprisingly, which would be fun.
They definitely got a lot of interesting pieces there. I know a lot of people really, really liked Aiden Childs coming out of high school. There's a guy here that I think I'm going to take my shot on here coming up. But let's see. Got a couple more questions in the chat. So once Shane makes his pick this round, we'll try to hit up some of these questions. Trevor, Mike, and Mitch, I see y'all's comments, or Justin as well. I see y'all's comments. And Clint, I really wish that you would have let me get that double Michigan State there. But c'est la vie. No, I can't get them all. But I will go ahead and take Lewis Brown, the 4th here out of San Diego State. I mentioned that depth chart earlier that we were talking about, Marcus Cooper and Keenan Christon. It did also talk about the wide receivers, and it did not have Lewis Brown the 4th as the top option at the outside wide receiver position, but he's still the guy that I'm taking the most shot on here. He had a really good season for Colorado State last year, really helped out a ton when Justice Ross Simmons went down, and they really needed a second guy to step up over there. He's making a lateral transfer here to San Diego State, another Mountain West program. There's really not a clear number 1 wide receiver out of that group. Again, I do like Nate Bennett a little bit coming over from Sacramento State. No, not Sacramento State, Portland State. Excuse me. And again, I'm willing to take the shot here on that top outside position for Sean Lewis, because over the last 5 years, Sean Lewis's top wide receivers have averaged 18.3 fantasy points per game. And I've mentioned this before on the show. That doesn't sound like a ton. Because you're like, oh, wow, the top end wide receivers in college fantasy usually are averaging, like 20, 22 points per game. But do you guys know how hard it is to consistently have your top wide receiver averaging 18 points per game over 5 years? That is incredible consistency and something I'm willing to take a shot on here late. Shane, you take Cedric Irvin Jr., the running back out of Stanford. What do you like about him?
I think a Stanford offense could end up being pretty good and have a lot of scoring opportunities. I think Irvin's, a pretty tough running back that can go between the tackles, that can go outside, catch some passes. I think he's multifaceted. I think Stanford surprises some people this year, so I like the value on a lot of their players.
Mitch, you're killing me, man. I was hoping to get that AJ Duffy stack with Lewis Brown the 4th, but c'est la vie. All right, got a couple of names, a couple of questions here that a couple people have dropped in the chat here. Justin Nottingham, I don't know if he's saying Gillenborg as in like he was sad to see Gillenborg come off the board there as 17-8. But Shane, what do you think about John Michael Gillenborg, the tight end out of Wyoming there?
I think he's fine. I'm a little bit unsure of maybe the upside potential. But I think in this, I'd probably rather have Jack Felling than Gillenborg. So I think maybe slightly overrated. I don't mind in the 17th, but I do think the Wyoming offense, has some potential maybe if he could be a good red zone threat to continue that. But there's some tight ends I like better that haven't been picked yet that I'm going to keep quiet too.
I personally like it whenever a tight end is going to be the leading receiving option on their offense, and that going into the season, right? It's pretty much one of the safest investments, in my opinion, you can make at the tight end position. Yeah, he may not have, Brock Bowers or Dallin Holker type season, right? But, when you're drafting this late here in the 17th round, like you're looking at guys that, while we like them, right? Definitely some bust potential among every tight end here versus Gillenborg. I think you're pretty much locked into 8 to 10 fantasy points per game just because he's going to be the number one guy that their quarterback's looking for. Love the pick there with Landon Ransom there out of Rice. Great stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's going to play that Luke McCaffrey role, and we saw what dividends that could pay. So I'm excited about Ransom's opportunity. I love getting that in the 19th.
All right, I'm taking another shot on system play here at wide receiver. I'm going to go ahead and take Chris Hudson. I guess we saw Josh Meredith there come off in the 11th round. Again, I like Meredith. I expect him to be the starter for Wazoo, but man, I'm going to hedge my bets here. I'm going to take Chris Hudson going off 8 rounds later. To me, it just makes a lot of sense. Why not take the shot on the potential starter at the slot position, one of the most consistent positions in college, or consistent system spots in college fantasy that you can find right now. So, more questions in the chat. Trevor Hanna says, who is a sleeper quarterback that you could see having an absolutely epic season? I guess it really depends on like what you mean by sleeper. Again, are you talking about round 20 plus, like could go undrafted in your leagues? I think that I might need a bit more clarification there. But given the fact that I have only 3 quarterbacks, and like I said, I usually draft 6, you're probably going to see me take some quarterbacks here late that I'm feeling pretty good about. In fact, I'll go ahead and take one here. I'll take Ethan Vasco out of Coastal Carolina. If you listen to that G5 Hive episode where they discuss Coastal Carolina, they discuss with the beat reporter there. The beat reporter there compared the situation of Ethan Vasco and Grayson McCall to the situation in Oklahoma with Jackson Arnold and Dylan Gabriel, where obviously the staff like their veteran, but they kind of like the younger guy just a little bit more, and they very kindly asked the veteran to seek opportunities elsewhere so they can move on to the younger guy. Given how great Grayson McCall has been for Coastal Carolina over the last couple of years, he's a dual threat guy. Let me see if I can bring up his stats from the end of the season, but he was on a roll to end of the season for Coastal Carolina. I think he was averaging over 25 points per game in his 3 starts to end the season. I'm hoping that continues going here. Shane, Anthony Watkins, running back out of Tulsa. I like the upside on that pick. Why don't you tell everybody why you like him?
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely here for the upside for Tulsa primary running back. Going to be a run first team, I think, for a lot of the season and a lot of the games. I like how their schedule sets up as well. So once again, in some of these late picks, I'm kind of keeping an eye on that late season, that playoff, schedule potentially, and I like Watkins there too.
Alrighty. So, Trevor, again, keep an eye out throughout these last 10 rounds here, and you'll see me take some quarterbacks that I feel pretty good on, because I grabbed my top 3 quarterbacks, but I think, if I remember correctly, I grabbed Chandler Morris in round 9, and then I waited another 11 rounds before I took another quarterback. So, I'm going to have to dig into some of my sleeper quarterbacks here towards the end of the draft, and for the most part, there's some guys here that I still really, really like. So, another question from Mike S. He says, is it me or is Caden Prescorn underrated? Seems like a strong candidate to outperform his ADP. And honestly, Mike, I agree with you. I think he's being properly taken for the most part. Where he's going, I think in this draft, where did he go? He was, 17-12. Yeah, he was very much a value there. I've seen him typically go around kind of like round 11 to 13 range. He usually goes in that tier of tight ends, but given how good we expect this Ole Miss offense to be and how much they spread the ball around, I do think that Prescorn's in pretty good position to basically meet what he did last year, if not outperform it. And again, let me see if I can pull up last year's stats, but I do believe he finished in the top 15 of tight ends. Let me just double check on that real quick. Make sure I'm not talking out of my butt. Where is Prescorn? Prescorn. Oh, I am talking on my butt. He finished as tight end 70 last year, but that was also with him missing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games. Ton of games last year. So if he can just, let's see, if Missed 5 games, so let's just say that he basically doubles what he did last year. That puts him, pretty easily in the top 12 tight ends. Again, probably a little bit less than that. So if he stays healthy this year, I think he's absolutely a guy that can outperform his ADP. I'm back on the clock there. Justin, hate you for taking that Damian Taylor pick right there. I really wanted him to come back to me. Joe, obviously listening to the latest Chasing Natty episode, grabbing Quavez Humphrey there, the wide receiver out of Sam Houston. Very much a sleeper pick right now. I'm going to go ahead and take another quarterback here. I'm going to take Blake Shapen out of Mississippi State. Mitch, I don't like you because you tried to get somebody else to take him there, but I really like Blake Shapen's upside this year. Again, Jeff Lebby offense. He's shown that he can translate his offense in year one pretty much everywhere that he has gone. And so I expect him to do it once again at Mississippi State. He's brought in a lot of guys that I like. Obviously, Blake Shapen, I think, fits his offense pretty well. Kelly Akari came off the draft earlier. I also kind of like Kevin Coleman as a best ball option. I do think he's going to have some pretty big weeks throughout the season. And really, there's all the incentive in the world, in my opinion, for Jeff Lebby to just put up as many points as possible in his year one, right? Like, that's the kind of thing he's going to do in order to sell tickets, to get people's butts in seats for Mississippi State, but also to really show like future recruits that, like, hey, come here, we're going to have fun. We're going to throw the ball around a ton. We're going to have a great offense. It could be a ton of fun, and especially with the fact that I don't think they really have any great options at running back this year. I do think that there's a ton of potential there for him to really put up some points with his quarterback. I'm going to take a wide receiver here that I like. I expect him to be one of the guys that here in the later couple of rounds, you're talking about a guy with 100 target upside. I'm going to take Dylan Goffney out of Colorado State. Obviously, Torrey Horton's the prize pig of this offense, but somebody's got to make up for the loss of, Lewis Brown IV, Justice Ross Simmons, Dallin Holker. This offense needs another option over the middle, and Dylan Goffney is 100% the guy that has to step up for the Rams if they're going to be as productive as they were last year. This offense loses 241 targets from last year. If Goffney can just get a fourth of those targets to come his way, he's hitting 100 targets this year, and that's something I love grabbing here in the 22nd round. Shane, you took Garrett Oakley. Screw you. I was kind of hoping I would get him later, but you're also on the clock now, so why don't you talk about your next Oakley and whoever you're about to pick here?
Yeah, I mean, I love Oakley's upside, obviously, taking the place of the major producer on an offense that runs through the tight end is great at Kansas State. So I'm pretty happy with Oakley as an upside shot. I think you're going to get a couple zeros, potentially out of him, as you will with most tight ends in this range. But I think you also get some spike weeks. And then I'm going to go with Jordan Hudson out of SMU. I think that SMU offense is going to be very good. And to me, he's underrated. I think he could be, one of the top options for sure in this offense. So I think we'll see a decent amount of catches and touchdowns from him.
All righty. Yeah, I definitely like that pick a lot. He's definitely somebody I'm keeping an eye out for in terms of helping prove the year two transfer theory that we've kind of been floating around a little bit, that these guys who we expect to do great things year one of their transfer don't end up playing out. They're like the ultimate people to target when it comes to post-hype sleepers in college fantasy, I think, moving forward. Because, again, we think they're going to do big things year one, but in reality, they needed another year under their system to learn the system, to kind of learn the playbook and everything. And then year two, especially if they're a talent like Jordan Hudson, is where they kind of break things out.
Yeah, no, I agree with that too. I think I definitely fallen victim to taking the transfers that Hudson included last year that I thought would be, wheels up year one. But we've seen a lot get more comfortable in the system in year two. I think it's something to keep in mind with those transfers in the transfer portal now.
Absolutely. All righty. A couple of interesting picks coming off the board here. Again, Kellen Mullings, some tight end picks that I like. Dorian Singer, love that pick by Mitch there. I think, again, you're just shooting for Utah. I do think is going to be a little bit different than what people expect this year. It is something that is kind of floating in the back of my mind, but we've seen this over and over again, right, Shane, where quarterbacks that are in their last year, have been with the program for a while. It's basically the Kenny Pickett path, where it's their final year in college, and regardless of what kind of offensive system the schools have run in the past, they want to try to have these quarterbacks get drafted, right? They're going to throw all in on them, and they kind of try to let them put up some video game numbers. And I do think Cam Rising, especially with him missing all of last year, I do think that there's going to be potential makeup season for him here, where they're going to let him chuck around the ball a little bit more recently. And for what it sounds like in the spring, Dorian Singer is that clear top guy. He was great at Arizona 2 years ago. Obviously, last year at USC was a disappointment, but all indications are that Singer looks like he's going to have a bounce back season here, which I think answers your question, Mitch. I do like the pick here in the 22nd round. What do you think, Shane? What do you think of Utah this year? Am I off base kind of making that prediction, or what do you think?
No, I mean, I think they're still going to, work probably through the run as much as possible. But I think we know Dorian Singer's talented. I mean, he was once thought of as a potential maybe first round NFL draft pick, with that type of potential. And so I'm with you. When you have that really old quarterback, we've seen a lot of those older 7-year quarterbacks break out because they have so much experience watching film and breaking down teams. And especially when you have someone that's stuck around, stuck around one program for so long, they know a lot of the teams they're playing against. I could see Utah having success this year. So I'm kind of with you. And 22nd, I mean, I think Singer could be a steal.
I think so too. I'm definitely liking his value here late. I need to check where I have him in my rankings. So more than likely, I probably have him a little bit too low. So, yeah, we're getting in the back end of the draft here. We got about 8 rounds left. So, Shane, I asked this question to a lot of people who are guests on these live draft streams. What do you kind of look for as you get into the back end of these drafts? Are you somebody who looks for upside? Are you trying to fill holes under your roster? What do you look for?
I mean, I think a lot for me is upside, but at the same time, I think when you talk about a best ball league, you don't want to have a ton of zeros on the roster either. I mean, it's pretty statistically proven. Like if you have close to 30 players scoring, that you have a good chance to continue that late season momentum, make up a spot or two if you're down in the standings. So when a winner take all, I think you need upside, but at the same time, you want guys that are going to stick around, have a role. So I kind of waffle back and forth between taking small school players that I think will clearly have a large role for most of the season, and then sometimes I'll take some talent upside in the power four who I think are really good players. Maybe in a situation that you don't expect a ton of great numbers, but they could be breakout stars and just absolutely dominate. I'll take a couple of those with my NFL draft background as well.
Understandable. Alrighty, you took Zach Evans there, running back out of North Texas. What do you think?
I've always liked Zach Evans. I liked him in Minnesota. I think he can lead. I think he can kind of carry the load for North Texas. I think it's above his talent level. So him and Irvin, who I drafted in the 18th from Stanford, have been two of my bigger targets late, I think, to draw some of that upside for offenses that I think will be better than a lot of the general public thinks.
Well, I took the other guy. I took Ikaika Ragsdale, running back out of North Texas. It's one of those things where as we kind of get closer to the season, again, I like upside of certain running backs in certain situations, right? I think North Texas and UAB are probably the two prime examples of this, where I love Liba B. I love Zach Evans. Problem is, like, as I keep listening to beat reports, I keep reading about these teams, they keep talking about these seniors. They keep talking about Isaiah Jacobs. They keep talking about Ikaika Ragsdale, about them at least getting that first shot to be the number one guys. Obviously, Ragsdale and Jacobs both coming off of injury. But right now, I think that given the fact that Ragsdale was looking good last year before he went down with injury, and the fact that Iowa Day, for as much as they were rotating their backs, still finished with over 1,000 yards. Now, granted, there was some incredible efficiency there. I do think that Ragsdale is in for a pretty good season if he legitimately is getting that first crack. So I'll hedge the bet with you taking Evans. I'll take Ragsdale, and I'm going to take my second tight end here. This is again a bit later on, then I typically wait for my second tight end. But so we'll see what kind of value I can find here late. But I'll take Kyle Morlock out of Florida State. We're kind of worried about this passing attack because we don't really know who's there. But man, Kyle Morlock was somebody, again, I do projections for my tight ends because it's just hard to rank them without them. And Morlock was a guy that stood out of my projections. Again, they threw to the tight end a ton last year. Granted, a lot of it was Jaheim Bell, right? But Morlock kind of got his last year as well. And we know for a fact that DJU's coming from both Clemson and Oregon State, both of whom have utilized the tight end well over the last couple of years. Morlock's a huge target. I think he'll be big in the red zone for Florida State this year if there's really no other passing attack options outside of Malik Benson that they're looking at there. I'm willing to take that shot here late.
I like it. I like Morlock. I think he's talented. I think they like him a lot there. Like, he's going to be on the field. He can block as well. So sometimes that's half the battle. If you get a player that's on the field and get targeted in the red zone, I think you could get 3-4 weeks out of him with maybe he has 2 touchdowns in a week. And I think that's all you're looking for a 24th round tight end,
No, for sure. You took Barry Brown there in the 24th, looking for a bounce back season from him?
Yeah, I like where Kentucky's going a little bit more this season. I think transition, and we'll see with bringing in a obviously transfer was a big time quarterback. I think we see Brown have a couple big games. Once again, probably not a player I would take in a typical set your lineup league, but I think Brown has the upside to have a couple spike weeks, and I think he has a nice floor because they're going to still utilize him because he's such a talent. So I like that balance in the 24th.
All righty. I'm loading up on some quarterbacks here. I do have to be careful with my quarterbacks. I have 3 quarterbacks that are on bye in week 10, which kind of limits some of the quarterbacks that I was kind of hoping I might be able to take a shot on. And, well, there's another one that just came off the board. Thanks, Luke. Thanks for taking DeQuan Finn up, and Buffalo Shoes takes Mikey Keene. That's another guy I was just looking at. That was non-week 10 bye. I'm sure now that I've said that, all the quarterbacks with non-week 10 buys are about to come flying off.
Yeah, I gotta do some searching here before my pick. Just to, nah.
So, but no, I've kind of loaded up on a few guys here that I'm willing to take shots on towards the end of the draft that I'll feel pretty dang good about. Some upside guys, some kind of safer guys, but might be that I just kind of wait because I got 6 quarterbacks in my queue. I'll kind of see which ones kind of fall to me here. So Mitch Hart sounds like he wants more talk about the Florida State offense this year. So I already kind of gave my brief thoughts about how I'm kind of worried about their passing game. Clearly, they're missing a lot from last year. Just look at what happened to them in the bowl game against Georgia. Clearly, they're probably going to take somewhat of a step back this year. How do you kind of view the FSU offense this year, Shane? Are you drafting anybody from them?
Yeah, I mean, I like that they're pretty much all coming out of value. I mean, the entire team isn't being drafted very highly, so I do think I do think we see a step back. They're not going to be what they were last year, but I'm not afraid to take Malik Benson once again, especially in a best ball late, to have with his speed a couple shots. I think DJU is a very competent quarterback, all things considered. So I like that, and I think running back wise is intriguing. Is definitely at least a situation I'll keep an eye on, even if I'm not going to draft Roydell Williams or Lawrence Toafili at this point. Definitely something I'll keep an eye on.
Oh, for sure. Shane, you're up on the clock. Who are you taking, man?
Oh yeah, I'm torn. I think I'm going to go back to the Maction, man. I gotta get those points early in the week. I think that's the way to go.
Good
so
pick.
we'll take one more wide receiver in McMillan out of Buffalo.
I like that pick quite a bit there. Again, he's another situation. I like the strategy you're hitting on with wide receivers, where you're just looking for guys, man, that like either bounce back seasons for guys like Hudson and Brown there, but also guys that can probably be the ones that their offenses have to rely on. Again, you're looking at it with Jordan Moore, Christian McCray, Elijah Metcalf, and now I'd say McMillan as well. If Buffalo is going to do anything this year, it has to be McMillan that steps up. And so I like the bets that you're making there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the way to approach when you're going 8, 9, 10. receivers deep ultimately.
For sure. Also, Mitch, I liked your Michael Benefield pick there. He was a he he was dominant in my first year of college football 25, my dynasty there. I rode him into the absolute ground there. Speaking of a guy that I'm kind of hope gets ridden into the absolute ground, I'm going to take my shot on this James Madison backfield here. Obviously, Bob Chesney has been just been absolute dynamite when it comes to producing top end running backs in his offense the last couple of years. And it looks like I do believe Ayoadehi transferring over from North Texas, just hyper efficient in the AAC last year. Hoping he continues that here in the Sun Belt. I'm really liking the fact that I was able to get him here as my 9th running back. Again, things are kind of drying up. Clint says, he said, screw your Adeyi pick. I'm taking the other guy with George Pettaway. And we'll see. We'll see who's right, Clint. Again, I don't hate it because I like Pettaway just as a talent. I was really hoping that he would be the next. I was really hoping he'd be the next Michael Carter there at UNC before he transferred out. Obviously, didn't work out. Maybe he'll work out a little bit better down the stretch. I'm going to take another tight end here. I'm going to go Keanu Hill, wide receiver / tight end out of BYU. He is moving over full time to the tight end position. We saw Isaac Rex be a great pick in CFF the last couple of years in that spot. I do question how good of an offense BYU is going to be because, man, I really don't like that quarterback room for the most part. And so I am, again, it's my 3rd tight end, right? Like, I've anchored it down with Jake Brenningstool. I'm taking upside guys at the position elsewhere. I like that Yazid Haynes pick there, Joe C. You guys know me. Love the shot on the Syracuse wide receiver one there. Again, I don't know how great the wide receiver one will be in Jeff Nixon's offense. Again, he's had no play calling history, so it's definitely a little bit rough. But, I'll take the shot here. I like the shot here in the 26th round. If you listen to the latest summer school episode with Bud Elliott on Syracuse, the first name out of the beat reporter's mouth was Yazid Haynes, and he named him as the guy that isn't being put on ACC preseason All-American lists, and he believes that Haynes will be on those lists by the end of the year. So I like the pick there, Josie, quite a bit. Shane, you took Anthony Colandrea there out of Virginia. Are you worried at all about the fact that it sounds like Tony Muskett might be given another shot as the starting quarterback there?
A little bit. I mean, I like I said, I think here in the last couple rounds, I'll take a shot on some of those battles. I mean, I think Colandrea is clearly the better quarterback. So even if he doesn't start the season, I think he's going to get a shot at that starting position and hold it at some point late. So once again, a little bit of upside. I think he brings to the table. Even if I don't think I'm going to need it in the first couple weeks.
All righty, Shane. Greg H. asks in the chat, he says, any quarterback wide receiver stacks to target among the Power 4 plus Oregon State, Wazoo, and Notre Dame? Last year, Greg had the Jaden Daniels, Brian Thomas stack, obviously. Again, there's clear ones at the top, right? Where, you're going for Dylan Gabriel plus Tej Johnson, who I believe, if I remember correctly, were actually taken together earlier on in this draft. Yes, they were.
Bob took them,
Jordan McLeod, Joey Hobart, like those are guys that, could be taken together. They go far enough away in drafts. But I guess I'll ask you, Shane, let's go again. That Brian Thomas pick would have been pretty late last year. So let's go late round, like maybe early round quarterback, late round wide receiver stack. Who would you target?
For in terms of later wide receivers, I guess I'm intrigued by Shadur Sanders with Will Shepherd as a late round pick. I think he's going to be more of the primary receiver for Colorado, and they're going to want to score, as much as they possibly can. So I kind of like that stack as well. I like grabbing, Nico Iamaleava in Tennessee, and then getting, I actually like Brew McCoy later for him. I think you could even stack multiple Tennessee receivers if you're not going to go score a white early and get some benefit out of that. So those are two that I like.
Yeah, I'm trying to look at some of these quarterbacks that kind of go off in that same range that Jaden Daniels was going last year. not a quarterback, or I would say probably Kyron Jones and taking a shot on either Quan Felton or Ali Jennings, making a bounce back season there. Virginia Tech might be a late round stack that I might go with there at wide receiver. Cam Ward and Jacoby George. Jacoby George is a guy that kind of varies greatly in terms of where he goes. Mitch Hart puts in the chat Avery Johnson / Jace Brown. I do like that call out quite a bit. I am a little worried that, again, we're not going to see top end wide receiver production from anyone on Kansas State. That might be the only thing here. But, taking the shot, why not? I mean, yeah, let's see. I think, Mitch has both Avery Johnson and Jace Brown. Why not? Why not? He was a true freshman last year and pretty much was close to leading the team in targets. Or I can't remember if he didn't lead the team in targets because Benson Noah was definitely their target leader. But he's definitely somebody intriguing last year as a true freshman. Could make a big jump this year. Or Kansas State, no wide receivers are good for us. But, it's 27th round. Why not? Shane, you're on the clock here, man. Who are you looking at?
I think I want to take one more tight end here. I'm gonna rip all the Fairweather. I think Auburn's offense has a nice bounce back, and I like his upside to have a couple spike weeks, couple touchdown weeks.
All right, I'm trying to decide what I want to do here these last couple of rounds. If I'm going to go with my usual stacks here, let me check my running back position here. Yeah, I can afford. Ooh, I like the Amari Hayes pick there from Joe C.
That's a good one, yeah.
I think running back. There's a couple of guys that I kind of like, so I'll probably just load up on my queue here. And I'll probably take my last tight end in this bunch. I'll go Homer here. Let's go Oscar Delp. He's the guy that I'm telling people to invest in if you want to invest in a tight end at Georgia. So I'll put my money where my mouth is. That Elijah Young pick by Clint Carlson is kind of a sneaky good pick there. We know that we typically view Western Kentucky as an air raid system, right? We typically view them as a place that is just running back hell for college fantasy this year. But with their fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years, right, we know for a fact that Will Friend, who is their offensive coordinator this year, has an offensive line background. Usually those are the kind of guys that like to have a good run game. Elijah Young, in my opinion, is pretty clearly the number one guy there at Western Kentucky. LT Sanders kind of gets mixed in there as well, but Young was having a really good finish to last season, especially catching balls out of the backfield. I think that is something that we definitely need to keep an eye on there at Western Kentucky. I like the shot here at the end of the draft.
Yeah, I like it too. We've seen some of those more air raid teams, the running backs benefit in CFF a little more than we think because they're scoring so many points. You could have a week with a weak red zone run defense or a reception out of the backfield in the red zone that works out.
Alrighty, I still got 3 quarterbacks I'm looking at here. I think I'll probably just wait and see who falls to me there and who's going to be my last running back. I do not know. I could take another wide receiver, though. There are some wide receivers that I still like on the board. Yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and take my last wide receiver here. I'll take Antonio Williams out of Clemson. Again, Garrett Riley's system typically spreads the ball around. So again, I'm not loving this pick, but Antonio Williams is a talent coming out as a true freshman. I do believe that after being injured last year, he's in for a bounce back season this year. He was the talk of spring camp for Clemson. With the rest of that wide receiver room, I do believe going to be in a bit of flux this fall and into the season. I think Williams will establish himself as the clear safety blanket in addition to Jake Brenningstool in that offense, and I think he's in for a big season here in his money year for the NFL. So I'll take the shot there. Definitely like him a little bit better than a lot of the other wide receivers kind of coming off in this range.
I mean, like I said, I like the shot on good talents, that this late, like in Antonio Williams, like a Barian Brown, that are good. It's just about if they're going to get the production numbers. Those guys could blow up and be like Brian Thomas.
Speaking of bounce back candidates, you just took Kavorian Barnes there out of UTSA. What do you like about that?
I still believe. and Kavarian Barnes to bounce back. I mean, I love what I saw from him, obviously 2 years ago, and still had a couple games last year. I still think the talent is there for him to lead UTSA in the backfield and give you some reception totals, things like that too.
I definitely like the pick there. Again, good bounce back candidate. All right, I got to decide which one of these quarterbacks and running backs I'm going to end up deciding. And one of my running backs came off the board there with Luke, with Jadarian Price. I've been eyeing him for a couple of rounds. I just want to see. Rebels takes one of my upside wide receivers there, and Alex Perry. I did mention him before in the draft. I do actually kind of like that pick quite a bit. I knew I was forgetting somebody when I drafted Antonio Williams. I probably actually would have taken Alex Perry over Antonio Williams, but I don't think it's going to be anything that keeps me up at night. All right, Shane, second to last pick. What are you looking at here, man?
Oh, all right. I'm going to take Velkamp. Like I said, I think he wins the Western Kentucky job over TJ Finley, and everyone else looks dumb. That's my goal. Or I'll just look dumb. One or the other.
One or the other. By the way, I completely missed your question earlier, Cooper. I hope you're still in the chat here, but he does ask any thoughts on Rocket Sanders this year. I have very, very big thoughts on Rocket Sanders. I'm not drafting him. Mostly because, again, like, I don't understand this decision at all. He goes from an SEC school with massive O-line issues, where that easily hindered his production last year, to another SEC school with even worse O-line issues. They were dead last in offensive line yards last year. Like, this is a big not even a step down from Arkansas, because they had their big issues, but the issue isn't solved. If I think that Rocket Sanders is probably looking at another bad year, especially if who's the North Texas running back they grabbed out of the portal? Oh my gosh. Oscar Attaway. If Oscar Attaway is any kind of good, I do think that they're going to have those two mix in together, and he's just not going to be the back that we thought he was going to be.
I mean, the thing is he's going back to the system where he was really good, where like we actually saw the production, right? I mean, this is back to that system that he had at Arkansas when they could hide a lot of the issues of the offense. So it is probably the best system for him to go back to, and he knows it. I think if South Carolina's offense is electric, then Rocket Sanders is a big part of that. Like, I'm fine taking the shot.
Mitch Hart also brings up a good point with Darius Braswell, DJ Braswell there, the young running back that I like kind of bit. You're not a big fan, Shane?
I mean, I like him. I just don't think he's going to play, right? Like, I don't think he's going to crack the top two of the depth chart, so.
Alrighty. I just took my last pick. I took one last quarterback.
There you go.
I was deciding between him and Sam Levitt out of Arizona State. I got a lot of Sam Levitt already, so I'll take the shot on Brock Vandegrift, dual threat quarterback playing there at UK. Justin Nottingham loved the pick there with Estera, recently named by Brian Phillips, the beat reporter there at Utah State, as the starting slot wide receiver for Utah State. He had a couple of big games for Charlotte last year, transfers over to Utah State. I think he's probably he's a pretty decent shot here at the end of the
Jared, I'm going to do it. You're not going to like it at all, but I feel like in the final round, if something happens, it's worth it. I'm going to take McBride here in round 30. If God only knows what happens or whatever. If he did what he did, he shouldn't play football ever again. But if he didn't do anything, if something whatever happened, then I'll take the top two Hawaii wide receivers on my team.
Yeah, Mitch
Hart,
Hart.
That's a game. That could be a game-winning move.
That could be a game-winning move there in the 30th round. Mitch Hart's definitely happy for you here. He says great pick with McBride. Madden taking my other running back that I was looking at there at the end with Jacquez Moore. I mentioned him earlier. All right, that is the end of the draft. So I appreciate all of you guys listening out there. Again, we got a little bit of time here. If anybody's got any last-minute questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. But Shane, looking at your roster, man, what do you like it? Is there something you wish you did differently? What are you thinking, man?
It's not my favorite. It's definitely maybe I probably would have invested maybe a little more in running back. Like I said, I do like to wait because I like Malusi and Hunt. I think can hold down most of that, but I probably took too many shots on players that are going to need the depth chart to break right to play and get me points. So I think it's an upside roster, which once again, if first place is the only one making anything here, isn't a terrible thing. I do like having Salter and Fannin. I think that can give me a positional advantage if I can cobble together the running backs and receivers. Hopefully it'll be okay.
I think I recovered decently well on my draft here. Again, I didn't love taking Io Maynor there in the third round. I really was kind of reeling a bit there from that Will Pauling snipe. If I had Will Pauling in this draft, probably be one of my favorite drafts that I've had this year. I like the way I recovered at receiver with obviously getting Bernard there in the 6th. I haven't seen him go that late in quite a while. Denzel Boston, Kobe Hudson, Xavier Henderson, all 3 guys that I like pretty well. And then just some upside shots on different Mountain West wide receiver rooms there. Lewis Brown, Chris Hudson, Dylan Goffney. If I get 2 out of those 3 guys to hit for me, I think I have a dominant wide receiver room out of the bunch here. And then I typically like to have, like, I'd say probably 4 to 5 running backs by the time like the 10th round comes around. But I kind of surprised myself with taking only 3 running backs in the first 10 rounds. And we're looking at, I think, some pretty decent value in the middle rounds here. Again, Jaquavius Marks fell a little bit. I think I got some, ADP wise, I think I got some good value there. But taking shots on Jackson, Carson, Carter, and then taking some shots on some senior guys here at the end with Ragsdale, Adier, and Jacobs. Again, similar with these 3 guys here with Ragsdale, Adier, and Jacobs. I just need 1 out of those 3 guys to meet the potential that I think they can have, and I got excellent value there late. And then quarterback, I don't typically go like that big of a gap between my top end guys and my back end guys, but I think for the most part I did pretty well there. So I think I like my draft quite a bit. I think this might be one of my favorite drafts that I was able to pull off this year. So maybe I'm looking at it through rose-tinted glasses because I'm starting to get used to the underdog drafts where it's power 4 only, and man, you don't feel nearly as good about those.
Yeah, right. You're low end of that roster. You're like, man, I hope this guy. You're like, I don't know if I'm getting anything out of him. So it's it makes it fun to be able to not just have the power 4 in the pool here.
I know, I agree 100%. Justin Dottingham asked one last question here in the chat. He says, what do we think of running back Anthony Tyus at Ohio, former Northwestern running back there, transferring down to the MAC? I mean, Shane, you took Ricky Hunt. Are you worried about Anthony Tyus at all with that pick?
A little bit. I actually liked Anthony Tyus coming into Northwestern. I thought he had the talent to emerge as a starter there. I think he's clearly positioned to be kind of a change of pace, take a series here and there, and Ricky Hunt's going to be the guy who can consistently churn out what they want to do at Ohio. So I'm not super worried, but I don't mind taking a shot on Anthony Tyus, in around 29, around 30. I think you could get some weeks out of him.
My thing is that, granted, it's based off of one performance, but again, when you listen to what limited information there is about Ohio out there, they really do talk about all the time about how just Hunt feels like a guy that shouldn't be playing on this level. His athleticism is just completely unmatched, and that is something that I think going forward in the MAC is something you have to invest in. You have to invest in these guys that, quite frankly, maybe they're not the best football players in the world, but man, they can outrun everybody. They can juke everybody. Harold Fannin fits into this category, right? Ricky Hunt, I think, fits here. Yeah. Krishan McCray is a guy that probably could have transferred up to a higher level of competition last year. When these guys do stick around, I think they're going to be the guys we want to invest in moving forward.
Sorry, I was going to say, I think we're going to see more of them stick around moving forward as, the change in NIL that's going to allow some of the MAC teams to, have some NIL money. And we've seen the downfall of MAC players moving up, right? I mean, it hasn't
worked out
extremely well. So I think we might see that. Yeah, I'm with you, because I think the MAC is probably the one conference to me where if you have power 4 athleticism, you can flat out dominate every single week against those defenses.
No, I agree 100%. Again, there's going to be less MAC options moving forward, but the ones that are there are going to be absolute dynamite. Mitch makes a comment saying, still nobody drafted in Braylon Sloan of Ball State. He says it's lonely on this little island. I did Mitch, it makes you feel better. I did consider him as one of my last running back picks here towards the end of this draft, but you took him before I could get to him. So on that little island, Mitch, but it is something that I don't think people are still fully bought in on. Because again, like there's still no confirmation that he'll be the number one guy. Now, obviously there were things we liked about him in the FCS last year, but it is still a jump up in competition, and obviously he still has to work his way up. So we'll see about Braylon Sloan. Alrighty, y'all. I think that pretty much brings us to the end of our show. Shane, really appreciate you coming on here, man. It's always a blast to hang out with you. I look forward to seeing you at the Fantasy Football Expo again and competing against you in the Kings Classic CFF Draft again this year. Before you get out of here, Shane, what kind of stuff are you working on, man? We got, obviously, you've done great work in the past, but what kind of stuff can people expect from you going into the actual football season here?
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, not as much college work as as I want to over at Draft Sharks now. But if you do, play redraft, dynasty, NFL fantasy, worth the subscription at Draft Sharks. Like I'm going to put out good content. They have great tools. It's really a cheat code in some of those drafts. So even home leagues and stuff, it's worth it. So I'm excited. To dive in there and hopefully do a little more film analysis for them, as they're definitely more analytical based. So that's going to be kind of my focus.
Sounds good. How much trouble would you get in, Shane, if you just kind of snuck in a little college article into the lineup?
I know, right? If I just posted something, I mean, look, it's going to be, I'm trying to get Devi in so I can have a pathway to C2C and CFF down the line, hopefully. So I'm reaching out to some people in the industry, trying to get some numbers so I could try to convince the powers that be maybe this is a way to go in the future and start investing in, because we've seen the uptick. It's coming. You would think
a company like Draft Sharks with draft in the name would be very interested in trying to get ahead on the NFL draft of the future. So I think you could be very successful in that moving forward. But obviously, I don't work for Draft Sharks, so you get done what you can get done, Shane, and you are awesome at what you do. So, like I said,
thanks for having me. I mean, I appreciate you having me. I know I'm not, compared to some of your other guests in terms of the pure CFF knowledge, I'm not fully there. So I appreciate you having me, Jared. It's always fun. I learned so much watching you this year, and I take what you and a lot of even your listeners say to heart, and that's how I learn and get better at this.
Hey man, Shane, you're one of the smartest guys I know in the industry. You're the only guy I know that can write a 7-round mock draft for 2027 in the year of our Lord 2024. So obviously you are a wealth of knowledge about just every prospect coming up, and I wouldn't be surprised looking at your team if you're somebody that's competing for the top spot in this league by the end of the year. So don't sell yourself short, man. You're awesome. Always appreciate having you on, man. With that being said,
thanks for having me.
With that being said, again, we're at the end of the show. Appreciate all of you guys there in the chat, all of you guys listening to the show afterwards. I will go ahead and I'll go ahead and make a quick announcement. Oh, I think we lost Shane there. It's all good. Appreciate all of you guys here at the end of the draft. I will go ahead and make a quick announcement, though. Next week, we're doing something very different. Nate Marquise will be joining me, and we are going to do a live Dynasty startup draft. It'll be a Dynasty best ball draft, so very interested to see how that works out. It is a very experimental league, so if you're interested in participating in that, DM me on Twitter at CFF_Jared, and we'll make it happen. But until then, appreciate all of you guys. Make sure you check out the new Chasing Natty tomorrow. Until then, have a wonderful and blessed week, y'all. See ya.